OP14's first championship in Japan is this weekend out in Tokyo. We'll be covering it on the channel, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see that. But especially if you watched my tier list video of the OP14 format the other day, there's a lot of things that are changing within this format, not only deck lists, but also the introduction of so many interesting and viable leaders. So I wanted to show you guys deck lists of not only the brand new leaders within the set, but also new additions in cards to existing leaders. All of these deck lists that you're seeing are located on Eggman Events' OP14 tournament deck list website. For anyone who does not know, I actually input deck lists on this page, stuff that I find from Twitter that do well in different Japanese Eastern region tournaments. Every one of these deck lists has a copy and paste where you can import it right to the optcg sim, and I think all of them also have deck list credits that links over to their Twitter posts, because that's where I see a majority of these lists. I update this page every couple days, so make sure to please check it out in the link down below. But now let's go into the deck list, first with Trafalgar Law. Now I think Trafalgar Law is one of the lower ends of the different leaders that come out in this set, but a couple of people have tried it, and this is kind of where I think the list is for the most part. Obviously, there are some tech options that you can change, but as a general core, this is what I would expect heading into a tournament. You've got your different search engines like Monkey D. Luffy, right? Being able to look for a supernova card in the top 5 on the on play, but also having one on the on KO of Basil Hawkins. So as I've talked about, you're mainly running almost everything as a supernova kind of card. The only outlier that's in this deck list is Unblockable Sanji from Starter Deck 21, as Luffy only searches for supernovas, does not find Straw Hats as he usually does. But one card that you can run to be able to find that Sanji is I have a plan to take down one of the 4 emperors. This finds specifically character cards, so I think statistically you have a 99.9999999% chance to hit on this every single time, but it allows you to find Straw Hat Crew kind of characters, making this searchable. We talked about how in Red Green Luffy and OP13, if you watch my last couple of videos, loves the unblockable, whether that's Diable Jambi or this Sanji, and I think this deck is no different. Just being incredibly aggro, right? You've got your on-play effects to be able to swarm the board with Eustace Captain Kidd fitting almost any of these characters at the beginning, supernova-wise. You've got 2 different rush bodies in the Roronoa Zoro, which can help not only with pressuring life, but also board control, and Trafalgar Law, swapping base power of one of your characters with your leader during this battle. Just 2 really important cards for this deck. I think especially at certain points of the games, you are very reliant on a rogue, right? Because what I've noticed from a lot of different people playing against Trafalgar Law in different videos and stuff is they go into a very heavy starve method like OP01 traditional Zoro if you were playing back at that time. This deck feels all gas, no brakes, and everybody is a threat to swing, especially with Trafalgar Law's leader effect of being able to swap base powers between characters. I also like the couple copies of Time for a Counterattack in this deck, right? 4,000 power counter events are a dime a dozen nowadays, it seems, especially with the introduction of this set, and are very good within the format, especially for this one. When you play it, if there is a character with 8,000 power or more, somebody gains 4,000 power on your field for the battle. There is more than likely, by the time you're playing this, maybe towards the end game or so, or maybe after 3-4 turns, that there is going to be an 8,000 power or more character on the field. Also, just having the trigger to be able to play a character card with 2,000 power or less from your hand is so nice to be able to get Cavendish on the field, to get a rogue on the field. You can even get these searchers like Luffy or maybe Basil Hawkins on the field to prepare for the upcoming turns. Next, we'll go into Dracul Mihawk. Dracul Mihawk, in my opinion, is the best leader to come out of this set and is already a big meta contender heading into these championships this weekend. And the thing about Dracul Mihawk is I've seen a lot of lists that are running a good amount of variety within the deck list. This is a specific list that intrigued me. I don't know if it's the best version of Dracul Mihawk heading into this championship, but one that I was curious about. So first, I'll talk about what I consider to be more of the staples in the deck list. Perona, right, is your basically entire engine of this deck. Being able to find slash characters or events makes it so easy to find that consistency within your deck. Really, the only thing in most all versions that it cannot grab is your Coffin Boat. Coffin Boat being played in every single list I feel like I've seen, right? Not only being able to replace itself in the hand similar to Merry Go in the GP Luffy decks, but being able at the end of turn to set up one Dawn as active is so good for your various one-cost counter events that you can run. Now, you may have seen based on Twitter and market watch videos and things like that, a lot of people are playing Billion-Fold World Triclosium or whatever it's called, right? Being able to gain 4,000 power. A lot of people I feel like run maybe like 3 or 4 copies. This person only running 1, but mostly because they have a heavy count of Dead Man's Game, right? Also another viable card within this deck. We've talked about it for the last couple formats, right, since its release in OP12, how strong this card can be, and it's no surprise to see it in this list. And then the final one that I see consistently, the new OP14 card, Strive to Surpass Me, Roar Zoro, right? Just basically another 4,000 power event, so long as you rest an additional card after your Dawn. The whole deck flows well together, right? I mean, you can have a variety. You could do like a character, like a Searcher card. You could do your Coffin Boat stage if you didn't already use it for your leader effect. Maybe you can just do an additional Dawn. There's a lot of flexibility of what you can rest with this card. Some of the other characters that I see consistently, I think Human Drill is probably the most consistent 2K that I've seen within this deck, but I've seen a wide variety, right, that you can play. I've seen the Kiku Nojo in here, right? I have seen stuff like Kozoburo, the old 2K from OP12 that KOs the 1 cost, rests a 2 costs. I've even seen other stuff like Fishman kind of things like Kawamatsu in here as a searchable 2K. So I think it just depends on what you're looking for exactly and what you need, right? Kiku Nojo is very good utilizing that end of turn for stuff like Strive to Surpass Me Zoro, right? Most all lists are also playing this Tashigi. This Tashigi is actually so good, especially when you can play it on curve. If you play this on curve and earlier in the turn went ahead and played the Coffin Boat, you can go ahead, tap 5 for this, use your leader effect to be able to restand 3 Dawn and swing aggressively for something like 7, 8 with your leader. Has a protection effect, so it can't be removed from the field so long as you have something else to rest on your side. And then on that activate main going into the next turn, on 7 Dawn, you play another really important card, Shanks. A lot of people are saying that this card is really what pushes Dracula Mihawk over the edge as a big meta contender. When it becomes rested, you can rest to 7,000 power or less. So after you tap 7 and play this as active, go ahead and use your leader effect to rest this character to then rest an opponent's 7,000 or less. And then with the 3 Dawn that you restood through your leader effect, you can just tap 2 of those for Tashigi right then and there, or maybe a 1-1 split with the Coffin Boat, right? 1 Dawn and 1 Coffin Boat rest to be able to give this Tashigi 8,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn, which can be so good for board clear, and especially because this gains 2,000 power until your opponent's next end phase, and because of Shanks minusing characters by 1,000 power when he's rested on opponent's turn. Not only does this Tashigi have a protection effect being removed from the field, but also it just makes it that much more difficult to be able to KO this character, especially if you leave Dawn open for stuff like Try to Surpass Me and also Billion World Track Anemone. I also see this Dracula Mihawk a ton. This Dracula Mihawk also very good for when you go immediately to 9, right? And think about the combos that I was talking about last turn. If you go into your 9 Dawn turn and you still have your Tashigi, still have your Shanks, go ahead, play this guy down. Nothing happens yet, but you immediately rest him for your leader effect, immediately proccing Dracula Mihawk's effect of saying, well, one of your characters with cost of 9 or less can't be rested, can't block, can't attack, can't use an activate main to rest itself, which is so good. And then you can go ahead and swing 7 Shanks to be able to rest the 7,000 power, and then on opponent's turn minus 1,000 power. And because you still have 3 Dawn left in theory and potentially your Coffin Boat as active, You could do the same loop with Tashigi, where you can rest one Dawn, rest a Coffin Boat to be able to make this an 8,000 power. That is a 9,000 power swing and an 8,000 power swing coming in without even thinking about how much Dawn you're attaching to leader. And then in the turn right after, on your full 10 Dawn turn, go ahead and play Law and Beppo. I see this card played in every single Dracula Mihawk list in terms of copies of 3 to 4. This card is so good in the list, especially because it's also searchable with that slash attribute. Being able to make your leader a 7,000 power leader is definitely a plus, right? We've seen that in the format through the last couple sets. And being able to proactively rest something and nullify it means that not only on the on play can you nullify one character on the field, but Dracula Mihawk, when it swings on your 10 Dawn turn after you played it last turn, is a 10,000 power swing that also, by the way, negates a 9 cost or less from attacking, blocking, all that stuff. In back-to-back 9 Dawn turns, you can negate 2 bodies. It is so good in my opinion, and that's why I think Dracula Mihawk is one of the better leaders heading into these championships this weekend. I also thought this list was interesting because it plays a couple copies of We Are. Most everything is searchable in the deck, right? But I can see maybe running a couple copies of this for a lucky search off of the trigger, but on top of that, being able to find Carrot potentially, right? Because We Are and the different music events from EBO2 search for a 4 cost or higher. Carrot is a perfect candidate for that, right? Being able to freeze another 7 cost or less. I think this format is going to have a ton of good 7 cost or less, so it wouldn't surprise me to see a couple Dracula Mihawk decks running around at these championships playing something like Carrot in their deck. Carrot already so good. We've showcased it in a ton of different lists, and this time is no different. The only problem is it's just minusing some slash searchable stuff. So you got to figure out if that is correct for you, because now you have 4 protection Tashigis that are not searchable. You've got 4 Carrots that are not searchable, which is 8 cards, and 4 Coffin Boats, specifically thinking of searching off Perona. You have 12 different options to be able to whiff, not counting the other 3 Peronas in your deck. So you're running a higher potential to whiff on this, but I think more often than not, you'll still be able to find something, right? Because you can grab slash characters and events. And now we've got Jinbei. Jinbei I've been pleasantly surprised with at the beginning of this format. I think Jinbei is definitely an aggressive deck. A deck that you hit hard, hit fast with, especially with the potential with these different 1-drops like Arlong, Chu, and Hachan to be able to swing base 5,000 power in synergy with your leader effect, right? Being able to give 2 Rested Dawn to a Fishman or Merfolk type character, which is pretty much your entire deck. Some of the other cards that I've been pleasantly surprised in this list is one with the Koala. After thinking a little bit more about the Koala after the set review video and talking to you guys in the comments a little bit, this card is definitely makes sense for the end game, right? Being able to play this down on the field to rest the 2, go ahead, trash this character to give plus 2,000 power somewhere, and then use leader effect to pitch a card in hand to be able to use those 2 rested that you use to pay this character to go on a Fishman or Merfolk type character. A pretty good set for your leader effect, in my opinion, an extra 2,000 power. I've also really liked this Shirahoshi in the deck list, right? Being able to play a Fishman or Merfolk of 3 cost or less is great synergy with a lot of these different characters, right? I talked about how the 1 costs are even so good, right? It doesn't necessarily feel too bad to play a 1 cost off of this effect, but also having the potential for Kurobi, right? Being able to get that rush potentially if you utilize your leader effect. And even potentially this Arlong. I'm not overly convinced that this promo Arlong is needed within the deck list. I can definitely see its viability if you're going ahead and playing this Shirahoshi right in your deck. Being able in the early game, if you play this basically on curve, guarding your life early. To be able to have 4 or more at the time that you swing with this character makes it so you can get another card out of their hand as you're swinging 5,000 power at lead, basically forcing 2 cards in the hand instead of 1. Fisher Tiger, I think, is a great card, and I haven't seen any deck not run 4 copies of this guy. Just again, a raw draw 3, and then synergizing well with your leader effect, you can make sure that you always have at most 5 cards in hand, so you never have to worry about this end of turn effect per se. Jozu, I think, is also a really interesting card to play in this deck because you have a decent amount of raw draw, right? The on KO on Hachan, draw 1 card. The on play of Chu, draw 1 card. Fisher Tiger drawing 3, as I just mentioned. Even Shirahoshi drawing 1 card. Adeline on KO, draw 1 card. Even Jinbei, right, draw 2. There's a lot of potential to draw this Jozu, similar to like Blue Kuzan, being able to just raw draw whatever cards they need, increasing the viability of playing tech cards. Because Jozu, as we've talked about in like the Ace deck and a lot of different blue decks, is just generally a good removal card in the game, especially because playing down this Jozu can immediately pick up something like Arlong, right? If Arlong's not needed on the field, it's a brick in your hand, but you can remove something off your opponent's board and then go ahead and use Jinbei's leader effect to pitch this card because you don't need it anymore. And boom, now you got 2 Rested Dawn to throw somewhere. Because of your raw draw and your leader effect, I also think high counts of Red Rock are respected in this deck, right? Being able to draw so many cards allows you to be able to decide basically when and where you want to have this card and if you need it. Does not clog up your hand because of your leader effect. You can use it when you want and then go in with the finishing blow of Perfume Femur, right? Because 7 Warlords of the Sea, you've got 7 of these different cards, which, by the way, does that include the leader Jinbei? No, it doesn't. So there's 5 different attacking kind of cards that can utilize the Perfume Femur. It's so nice to be able to go for the end game, whether that's Jinbei getting the unblockable, right, as a 10,000 power character, or your leader, right, because your leader is 7 Warlords of the Sea. I'd be very curious to see a Jinbei in the top cut of the Tokyo Championships. I definitely think that it could legitimately happen. Now, Boa Hancock, this is the leader that I think is the second best to come out of the set. There is definitely conversation and argument to it being the best leader to come out of the set, but I think Dracul Mihawk kind of pushes it over the edge a little bit. This deck, though, I think does a little bit better into Ace than Dracul Mihawk does. Remember that Boa Hancock, right, more than likely is going to run some EBO3 cards that are contained in that set, specifically the Nami, right? This card just generally being so good. It is just a generically good yellow card. You'll see it in a lot of Eastern lists and especially Western lists once we get the EBO3 cards in February. OP14 and the first half of EBO4 coming out in January, remember. You're running a mix of these different triggers in the deck, but also 7 Warlords of the Sea, right? Running 24 different 7 Warlords of the Sea kind of cards. It has a lot of people playing Sengoku. Sengoku, you may remember from Doflamingo, right? But it is played in this deck because it helps you find your Boa Hancock. Because it specifically looks for types of cards, I see a lot of Boas playing this Kuma, the SEC Kuma, which, by the way, from OP12, has the 7 Warlords of the Sea kind of tag. Allows you to heal, gain that additional cost, and be a sticky body on the board if they don't want your Kuma to be able to heal on the on-KO effect. Even the Gorgon Sisters, right, is a 7 Warlords of the Sea kind of card, allowing you to give all of those done to your different characters on the field, especially because you need 3 Amazon Lily or Kuja Pirates type cards in your hand to be able to get that off. And so you have 8 different Amazon Lilies and 24 different Kuja Pirates, which is definitely a high enough count to get it more often than not, in my opinion. I've also been pleasantly surprised about Shaku Yaku in the list, right? Not only just a good 2K to have in the deck, but also being able at the later stages of the game to filter out your hand, potentially play this card on the field as an attacking body being at 5,000 power is just really nice, I feel like, in some niche situations. And then this Boa This boa is just good. We're even going to talk about this boa later in a different list. But that on play for 7 Warlords of the Sea kind of leaders, oh man, just so good. Being able to add a life and have your opponent take a life card. And then with that trigger, being able to spew out a different character is not bad either. I personally like You'll Frighten Me as a couple copies in this deck, right? Just being able on that counter phase to negate essentially in the end game one of your opponent's active characters. It really makes your opponent think about what they want to actually swing with, especially because you also run Slave Arrow, right? The one Dawn that you can be leaving open is for either one, so your opponent really has to think about it, especially because you play some impactful cards like Hiyori, right? Very playable 2K, ability to grab off of Slave Arrow. Gloriosa, being able to cycle life can be also very nice to grab. And even something like Pudding, I think I've seen in some Boa Hancock videos where you play Pudding aggressively in the early game and then later in the game use Slave Arrow to pick it back up and then utilize the Pudding as your finisher. Definitely an insane combo in my opinion. Ran also I see is something in a lot of these Boa Hancock decks, right? Being able on the activate main to give your leader or character of Kuja Pirates a rested Dawn, which works perfectly in synergy with this leader effect. So a lot of times on 4, you've got the flexibility of if you'd rather run Ran, or maybe you need to look through the deck a little bit to be able to find pretty much every time on turn 4, you are going to have a given Dawn to your leader just simply because both of these characters on a 4 Dawn play give one to your leader. Makes it very, very nice. It wouldn't surprise me to see Boa Hancock win the Tokyo Championships this weekend, especially because you also can just be very aggressive and then perfume femur your way through a victory, right? Especially if your opponent is taking life. Really makes it hard for stuff like Ace, in my opinion, to be able to battle your board. Because if they KO a character as a 3 life leader, they're going to be going down on life, so you're going to have to see a lot of Ace players trying to play around the idea of maybe going down to 0 for their own effects like Roger or other various reasons. Now, Doflamingo, I'm very excited about heading into this format, and although I wasn't 100% sure how the deck was going to perform in OP14, I do have the strong feeling, and I stand by this, of this deck when it gets going, it's gas. This is a list that I've found online that I have found pretty interesting, right? Basically running an entire Don Quixote Pirates kind of deck. The only 4 cards that are not Don Quixote Pirates is 1, the 9-drop Luffy, which can be very good, right? Being able to draw 1 card, replace itself in the hand, and be a 10,000 power rush character, but also Slow Beam Sword. I don't have a market video out right now, but if I did, I would put Slow Beam Sword on. I feel like there's a higher amount of people as of late, especially with Ace coming into the format and things like that, that are running Slow Beam Sword from OP07, right? Having the ability to be able to rest any one of your opponent's characters can be so good in so many situations, can prevent another attack, right? That we saw in the Oh, You'll Frighten Me event in Boa, but also in stuff like Green with Dracula Mihawk on the Law and Beppo. There's so many good situations for this. I would personally play a little bit more of an event heavy version. This version of the deck not running the 1-cost Searcher event, I don't know if you necessarily need to because you have cards 2 different searchers like Sugar and also Dellinger in the deck, but you can if you want to. And this one instead playing Everwhite, which is a nice way to be able to ramp, right? It's basically a gear 2 or a 3,000 power counter, but also Pentachromatic String has the ability in even the mid stages of the game to be able to ramp Dawn, right? 6,000 power or less, a condition that you need to have, is not that difficult to do, especially when you have different ramping potential like Baby 5, Sugar, the Monet. Once you go in with like the Don Quixote Doflamingo and play out something like Rosinante to establish your board, having his end of turn restand, your Pentachromatic String is so nice, right? Being able to tap those 2 for that specifically. And then you still have the Dawn -1 of your leader effect to be able to redirect an attack in different places. You can redirect it at a Dellinger to immediately be able to search. You can redirect it at Baby 5 to be able to heal a life. Redirect it to Sugar to play out another 5 cost in your hand. Or maybe even something like Doflamingo to be able to take an attack that's maybe 9,000 power, or maybe just a simple 10,000 power swing can redirect the attack here and a 1k to get out of it. Like I've said previously, I think that this deck is definitely good, do not get me wrong, but I think you have to find your combo pieces and really get the game going, right? I think there's a little bit more counterplay that you can do with this leader, but if you have no way to stop the train, it is so difficult once this deck gets going. It is so fun to watch. I could definitely see this making a top cut this weekend, but I don't know if I would expect it to win the entire championship. Now we've got Crocodile. As I've mentioned, I've been pleasantly surprised about Crocodile and how it functions as a deck, right? A lot of people were very worried about deck identity and what it really wanted to do, but I think what it does do does well. My only real issue with the deck though is that it is just very predictable in a lot of senses. The deck list for the most part is the same. It's just a matter of whether or not you can stop that repeated effects that you can more than likely predict. You do have some very powerful cards like Bon Clay, right? Being able to work very well with your leader effect to be able to play out one of these 5 cost Baroque work characters. You've got a lineup of Miss Doublefinger. I usually see this at 2, but this player was playing it at a full 4 copies, right? Especially because you can build trash very easily with this deck because of your leader effect and different characters that you play. Having 7 or more cards is actually not that bad. So this can be a 5 cost 7,000 power body. You've got Mr. 1 Daz Bones, which I've actually been pleasantly surprised to see. I see people typically run at least 2 copies of this card, usually varies between like 2 to 4. Being able to not only rest a 0 cost character, which is very easy with your leader effect, but be able to attack on the turn that it's played into different characters gives you a kind of board control style where you don't have removal effects on your opponent's side like other typical black decks do, but if you just swing into them, can they stop it after a certain point? And then also one of the most important, Mr. 5, right? Being able to be a blocker and then draw 2 trash 1 hand filter builds up the trash a little bit while also finding some of your key pieces to set up for future turns like Miss All Sunday, being able to play out 2 different characters, one being a 4 cost or less, and the other being a 1 cost, which could be Miss Golden Week, which could be Miss Wednesday, which could be Miss Merry Christmas, or if you just want to go ahead and search, you could just do Miss Valentine. And then for your big boss monster loops, 8 cost Crocodile. I've talked a little bit about this card and the different effects that you can do with this to be able to basically loop and say, well, your 9 cost over there, I'm not going to let it attack for the rest of the game, basically. I've also been pleasantly surprised about the Haughty Couture patchwork that I've seen in this list, especially because your leader effect minuses 10 somewhere. This is a really good event to be able for a single done after you use your leader effect to say, okay, that character will not become active. Basically a freezing effect. I would most definitely play this card in Crocodile, right? Especially if you've got the space alongside the Ground Death, right? We're going to talk about this Ground Death because I think this is just generically a good black card that most black decks are going to run. And I think we have a couple more deck lists that have this card in it. Being able to negate a 5 cost or less could be a blocker, could be something with that gives itself additional power, etc., or just 4,000 power. I think this deck is very similar to Doflamingo, where I could see it making the top cut in a championship and it wouldn't be that surprising, but I don't know if I expect it to win the tournament in general. I feel like Crocodile is going to be one of those decks that really excels at the beginning of the format, but I think maybe falls off a bit as time goes on unless there's a lot of ingenuity that could come with this deck. The final new deck that we have in OP14 is Gecko Moria. Now, this is the leader that I'm most curious about, or I still think there are some pretty cool lists and designs that you can utilize in your deck list that go along with this leader if you really want to play it, as it does have a couple entries on the Eggman site of where I've seen people play it and excel at different events. You've got a fair amount of old cards and new cards in this set, the old cards being Victorious Sindri, which in my opinion was a no-brainer 2K to add to this deck. You play it down, you mill 5, set up your trash. Enoop I think is very, very neat as well. Being able to filter the hand once again, be able to load up the trash. The Perona, right? Perona just as well being a very good 2K to have out on the field, especially with that on-play effect of your opponent trashing one card in hand if they have 5 or more, is actually something that you can get off a ton, right? Because if you watched my set review video, pretty much all these new cards in the Gecko Moria deck play out a 4 cost or less from the trash, right? This one does it as well. The Dr. Hogback does it. The Absalom does it on top of that. So you can definitely loop this card a ton if you wanted to. Constantly being able to trash an additional card in your opponent's hand before you start swinging. You've also got the PRBO2 Gecko Moria to be able to bring back one of these 4 costs or less onto the field, which by the way is all of these different characters right here, a good slew. And then your boss monsters consist of the Gecko Moria within the set. Once again, being able to play a 4 cost from your trash onto the field or just put it in your life. It makes it so you're not as dependent on this when attacking trash 3 cards to be able to gain a life effect, right? You do have some life regeneration, especially because your other boss monster, Boa Hancock, that we talked about earlier, is just a great card within this deck, right? It says that all you need to be is a leader with 7 Warlords of the Sea, which by the way, is this Gecko. You play this at a full 4 copies, and honestly, I don't think you need to play any more than 1 in a single game. So you just need to find it one time, even though it's not searchable at all. But with the raw draw of Enoop, who knows, you might be able to find it. I know this deck has a little bit of variance, right? Because in OP06, we got that original Thriller Bark set. So there's a couple ideas that you can play around with this deck, right? Groundwork being a card that a lot of people include because it's just generically a good card. I'll be curious to see if Gecko Moria ever breaks out in this format. Now going on to the old decks that are getting some new pieces, I'll talk about Emu real quick. I know it might not be very exciting to a lot of you, but Emus in the OP14 format you're going to start to see are all running Ground Death. I think you play this as a full 4 copies, at least 2, right? For the same reasons as before, right? You can 4/3 negate a 5 cost or less, which could be a blocker trying to go for game, which could be an annoying character that you want to get off the field. And then on top of that, with the counter side, you're definitely going to have 10 or more cards in trash if you have a good beginning of the game, right? With the Sauria search, with the 5 Elders are at your service search, discarding off of Marcus Mars. This list playing as well a 1 copy of Stussy, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Stussy move back into this format in Emu, right? We saw it a lot at the beginning of this format and saw it kind of tail off a little bit at the end, but especially as the Emu population goes down because these new decks are coming in, Emu is, in my opinion, not the best deck in format anymore, but still a very viable deck if you want to play it. You're going to run into the mirror match a lot less often, so Stussy can be a good way to get rid of those boss monsters on the field if you so have it in your hand through random draw. But for the most part, a little bit of the same. Just this event is just so good. We've got this bonding list right here, and this is actually from Fudelio TCG. If you know their content over on YouTube, I'll link it in the description. This is a list that they posted that they did well with at an event very recently within this format, and I thought it was really, really cool because Bonnie playing the new card potentially of Perona. Perona being able on that on play to negate 2 5 costs or less can actually just be so nice for a lot of these decks that are running with a heavy mid game of like cost 4 to 5, maybe even some 3s, right? Especially in matchups like Jinbei, Trafalgar Law that we've talked about previously in this video. You can make sure that they can't attack in the next turn. You can also negate blockers as well. And then if you're facing against some sort of removal deck with that on KO go effect, you can play out one of your 5-cost characters, which if you've heard me talk about in Bonnie is so important in this deck. You can play the 5-cost Jewelry Bonnie, you can play the Cavendish, you can play the Carrot, you can play even X-Drake if you wanted to. I think that Perona can actually be a pretty decent addition in this deck, and you don't necessarily need it every single game because it is tough to get out, I feel like, because your 5-7 Dawn turns are heavily impacted by stuff like Carrot, Cavendish, and Jewelry Bonnie, but definitely a really cool option in my opinion, especially off of something like maybe the 8-cost Dracula Mihawk. Sorry to put up the SP version. I accidentally hit the wrong button, the alternate arts, but Dracula Mihawk could be a really cool card in combination with the Perona. I've also just more consistently, especially after we saw the Bonnie win the Japan Championship, more people are playing the Law and Beppo card, so there's 2 decks right there that play this card that maybe you want to look for. And the final deck I'll talk about is Sanji, right? I think Sanji has some really cool upgrades within this deck, especially with the trend of Emu going downwards, right? Bringing up Dracula Mihawk, Boa, Ace into the forefront. I think this Reiju that we got in EB03 makes this deck so interesting in the format, right? With that, your turn on play, Dawn ×1 if your leader is Sanji, you can activate the main effect of up to 1 event with the cost of 7 or less from your trash. Just Dawn -1 to cheat out that event. Imagine doing Red Rock for only minusing 1 Dawn. Extreme value, very, very good in my opinion. And even stuff like Jinbei matchup, right? Trafalgar Law, using Gravity Blade, being able to bottom deck multiple characters for just 1 Dawn. Especially being able to do that, you now have more flexibility to be able, off of your Kayas, off of your Otamas, off of your Gum Gum Giants, off of your Gum Gum Rains or Jet Gatlings, whichever you prefer to play, to be able to trash one of these 2 events because you know on the on play, you're going to be able to utilize it yet again if you get one of these Reijus out. And by the way, that doesn't even count stuff like Boof Burst. Now you have multiple different versions of Boof Burst within this list. Gum Gum Jet Culverin, being able to more consistently bottom deck different events, and you have the opportunity to play more tech card events as well, because once it's in the trash, you can utilize it multiple turns with this Vinsmoke Reiju, right? Allowing you to have some flexibility in some of these counts, and you'll be able to build up the Sanji. I think the Sanji is going to be a little bit tough though, because now, especially maybe in like the Emu matchup, right? Before, if you just got this Sanji to a high enough power because of its secondary effect, it was hard to remove this Sanji off of the field. But now being able to use that 1-cost ground is it Ground Death or whatever what that event is called, the 1-cost event that we talked about earlier, you can now negate the effect of this character, and then not only does it go back down to 5,000 power, but also doesn't have the protection effect. So you could just use Marcus Mars to get rid of it, or maybe just swing Nuzjuro at it, get some power minus, make it a 3,000 power character. It is much easier to remove, but still probably in general a difficult matchup. I'm really curious. I need to watch a little bit more of Blue Purple Sanji to really gauge on whether or not I think it is a high level meta contender, but I do think, and I am being honest, at least from my tier list video the other day and right now, that I do think that this deck has a chance to be able to make a top cut again, as we saw at the end of the OP12 format. And that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what deck list that you're most excited about in OP13. And again, we'll be going over the Tokyo Championships. It should be later today, actually, since this video is coming out on Friday, or Saturday, depending on whether or not they stream only on Friday, only on Saturday. I think based on the schedule that I saw originally, it said 29th and 30th. So it's either going to be like Friday night Pacific time or Saturday night Pacific time that we're going over these championships. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.